Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Unshakeable People podcast, where we shape minds and build leaders. My name is Katie Kaspari, I'm your host, and I'm very happy that you found time to join me today. Our today's conversation, today's episode, I wanted to cover a topic that I was meant to cover for quite some time already, and we actually have discussed it in one of my recent streams, and you guys have asked me to make a full-blown episode on this particular one, so here it is. Now, did you know that many Americans are just one paycheck away from a financial disaster? The story today is about a guy. His name was Joseph Williams, and he didn't think he was one of these people. As a respected White House correspondent, he had status, he had money and security and all these jazz, until a single controversial comment basically destroyed his entire career. And in today's video, I am breaking down how Williams went from reporting on presidents to dealing with rude customers asking where the tennis balls are. His story is potentially like the ultimate wake-up call about how fragile success really is. And I promise you'll see your own job completely differently by the end of today's video. So I hope you stay till the end of the episode, because this, in my opinion, is useful for pretty much everyone in today's world. So, coming back to Williams, correspondent. So, who exactly was this Joseph Williams before everything fell apart? So, let me paint you a picture here. We are not talking about some random reporter, just some random guy trying to make it big. This was a seasoned political journalist who had reached what many would consider the pinnacle of his profession. Every morning, Joseph Williams would wake up, put on a suit, grab his press credentials, and head to a 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House. Yes, like the actual White House, guys, where the President of the United States lives and works. That's what kind of correspondent this Joseph Williams was and is. So yeah, imagine walking through these security checkpoints, nodding to these Secret Service agents who recognize your face and taking your seat in the press briefing room. And that little seat with your news organization name on it. And that was Joseph Williams' daily reality. He wasn't watching history unfold on TV like the rest of us. He was quite literally in the room where decisions affecting millions of people were announced and explained. So when the president of press, secretary, would scan the room looking for questions, they'd see Williams' face and know him by name. Joseph, what's your question? So the reason I'm putting this picture in front of you now is really because I want you to think about that for a second. The most powerful people in the country knew who this guy was and respected his role enough to give him direct access to information that would shape headlines across America. Now that's big. That's very big. That's what you call success in your profession. And obviously, as a White House correspondent, Williams wasn't just reporting news. He was part of this exclusive club that gets to witness the inner workings of American power up close. He'd built relationships with White House staffers and lawmakers and other journalists who all operated in this rarefied air of Washington politics. Now, when breaking news happened, his phone would light up with calls from people trying to get his perspective or share information with him. So this guy was pretty much known. He was known to his inner circle, he was known to people, he was known to politicians. He was the one that his colleagues and his peers would go to. And the thing about reaching that level in journalism is that it doesn't happen overnight. This Williams guy had climbed through the ranks. He probably starting with local stories nobody cared about and working late nights and chasing leads that sometimes went nowhere. So he'd proven himself enough times that editors would eventually trust him with bigger assignments. And each promotion, each better beat was a sort of a validation, some evidence that he was at what he did, he was good, that his work actually mattered. So by the time he was covering the White House, Williams had this whole ecosystem built around his professional identity. And his colleagues respected him, sources trusted him, readers and viewers recognized his byline or his face. His opinions carried weight. And when he walked into a room full of other journalists, there was probably this unspoken acknowledgement that he'd made it in their field. You know, that's the guy, that's the one, that's who I want to be. I'm pretty sure that there were those who were looking up to him as a role model. So let's be real about the lifestyle that comes with this kind of position. White House correspondents for major outlets. Well, let's put it mildly, they aren't struggling financially. We're talking about a comfortable salary that afforded him a nice place to live and probably in one of those DC neighborhoods where policy wonks and political insiders hang out at the same coffee shops and restaurants. So he could afford, to travel, go on vacations. He probably had those retirement savings and maybe helping his kids through college. All those, markers of middle-class security that so many people aspire to. And it's weird how quickly we start thinking about our job title per se, as part of who we are. Right? I catch myself doing this actually all the time. Well, maybe now a bit less than before, but before it was like a big thing. For example, someone asks, so what do you do? And that becomes this shorthand for your whole identity. And coming back to Williams, for him saying, I'm a White House correspondent, wasn't just describing how he paid his bills, right? It was telling people he was someone who mattered in the world of politics and in the world of media. It was instant creditability. It was instant respect, right? And honestly, when you've worked that hard to reach that kind of level, why wouldn't you take pride in it? And Williams had earned his spot through the years of dedication to his craft. He obviously had good education and he's put himself through enough struggles. And the confidence that comes from achieving something like that, it seeps into everything. How you carry yourself, how you present yourself, how you introduce yourself at parties to other people, how you think about your future, what kind of plans you make. There is, this sense that you figured it out, that you are on a path that makes sense and it will continue only upward. It would no longer go anywhere else but upward, right? That's the assumption. And one of the reasons why I decided to have these episodes and record these episodes today in the first place is a scary thought. When you've tied so much of your self-worth to your professional accomplishments, guess what happens when that suddenly disappears? Again, coming back to the example of Williams, for him, his position wasn't just a job. It was the culmination of decades of work and ambition. It was proof that he had value in society. It was the answer to that very question we all secretly wonder: am I good enough? I think that's what makes his story so terrifying for a lot of us, and me included. We look at someone like Williams and think, that could never happen to me, right? We convince ourselves that if we work hard enough, if we reach a certain level of success, we'll be fine, we'll be safe, we'll be all right. We won't have to worry about suddenly losing everything we've built just in a split second, all of a sudden. But Williams' experience shows us how dangerous that thinking and that mindset really is. When you are standing at the top, you rarely think about how quickly the ground could potentially crumble beneath your feet. And Williams, he probably felt super secure in his position. He'd put in the work, built the relationships, established the credibility. He's done it all. Why would he worry about it all vanishing overnight? No reason, right? And that's something that happens to other people. It's not something that happens to us. It happens to other people, to those who didn't work as hard as we do, or weren't as good as their job. But the truth is, none of us are as secure as we think we are. And the higher you climb in any profession, the more you have to lose when things go wrong. And they can go wrong so much faster than any of us would ever want to admit. One day, you are respected and you are comfortable, you are approved and appreciated by society, and you might be feeling like you finally arrived to your destination, like you finally have it all. And then the next day, everything can change. And that's exactly what makes William's story both so compelling and so uncomfortable to think about. It literally forces us to confront this question. If everything I've worked for disappeared tomorrow, who would I be? Who would I be? If I couldn't introduce myself with my job title anymore, what would I say instead? And these aren't any fun questions, you know? These aren't any pleasant questions to ask yourself. But to my knowledge and in my experience, they are the important ones. When we look at Williams standing in that White House press room, we see someone who had seemingly made it. Someone whose career trajectory looked like a steady climb upward. Someone whose professional identity seemed rock solid, and that makes what happened next all the more jarring. Not just for him, but to be honest, for anyone watching his story unfold and thinking, I don't want to be on this guy's place. So the next thing I want to touch on is the actual career-ending moment that Williams experienced. So that rock-solid career, it shattered in less than 280 characters, and I am not kidding right now. It was less than 280 characters. Let that sink in for a second. For Joseph Williams, that nightmare scenario of watching everything you've worked for collapse wasn't just some anxiety dream. It happened in real life, playing out in real time as his professional identity crumbled with terrifying speed. So what exactly destroys White House correspondents' entire career, you might ask? So here's what happened. In June 2012, Williams appeared on Martin Bashir's show on MSNBC to discuss presidential candidate, someone named Mitt Romney. And during this segment, Williams made a comment suggesting that Romney was only comfortable around white people. Okay? In fact, his exact words were that Romney seemed comfortable only, and here are the quote marks, when he's speaking to the Republican National Committee. Or, again, quote marks, when he's speaking to Fox News, apparently implying racial undertones about the then presidential candidate. Now, what happened next shows how quickly things can unravel in the digital age. Within hours, conservative media outlets like the Washington Free Beacon and Breitbart picked up the comment. They framed it as clear evidence of liberal media bias, claiming Williams had revealed his true partisan colors. And this clip, it spread like a wildfire across right-wing websites, each having more inflammatory than the last. So the social media amplified everything even more. People who hadn't even seen the original segment were sharing clips, commenting, and demanding action. And everyone seemed to be taking part in this discussion, even if people just didn't have any idea who all this conflict is about and around. So, obviously, Williams' employer, Politico, found itself caught in the crossfire. Pressure mounted from literally all sides. Conservatives were demanding his termination, others were defending journalistic freedom. So, initially, Politico tried to handle the situation with a suspension, probably hoping the controversy would die down eventually as the news cycle moved on. But that's not what happened at all. The backlash only intensified. And social media users, they dug through Williams' Twitter story, finding tweets that they claimed showed further bias, including some joking remarks about Romney, separate from that comment that he made before. So just imagine Williams' perspective during those chaotic days. Just imagine how this guy was living those days, how he was feeling during those days. He likely woke up that morning thinking it was just another workday, you know? Maybe he'd prepped for the segment, reviewed some talking points and headed to the studio like he'd done hundreds and hundreds of times before. And there is something uniquely terrifying about watching your professional reputation disintegrate in real time while you are absolutely powerless to stop it. Each notification on his phone probably brought another wave of dread, another angry email, another call from his bosses, another request for comment, you name it. So, for journalists, creditability is currency. And once it's questioned, this credibility, especially in such a public way, it's nearly impossible to reclaim. And Williams probably spent those days in a state of shock, desperately trying to explain himself while watching his world crumble. I am sure the guy did everything he could, and he was trying to use it with all the connections that he had at that time. Just think about that horrible feeling when you know that you've messed up. You know it, but you can't take it back. It's a mistake that is irreversible. Imagine that pit in your stomach growing bigger with each passing hour. Now, multiply that by 1,000 and imagine it paying out on a national stage. So literally, it's not only your disaster, your personal mistake, or whatever your personal mess that you've made. The entire country is looking at you. The entire country is talking about you. The entire country is discussing your belief systems, your morals, and everything else. And obviously, many people are not being very polite on the internet. We all know that. So the speed of William's downfall highlights something we all know, but prefer not to think about. Professional security is often an illusion. In today's hyper-connected world where everything is recorded, everything is archived and potentially weaponized, anything can become vulnerable in an instant, literally just like that. One comment, one tweet, one moment of poor judgment captured forever can erase decades of careful work, hard work, and effort. And Williams later reflected on this experience in interviews, noting how unprepared he was for the swift and severe consequences. Like most of us, he probably believed his track record would provide some buffer against one single misstep, and that his relationships with colleagues would offer protection, some kind of protection at least, that his years of service would count for something when judgment came. But to be honest, as it turned out, none of that mattered in the end. And what's particularly jarring about William's story is how it reveals the paper-thin nature of professional identity. When you spend your entire adult life building a career, that career becomes intertwined with your sense of self. Who are you without the job title? Who are you without that prestige that your job title gives you, without the daily routines and relationships that structure your life? And Williams was forced to confront these existential questions without warning or preparation. His story serves as a cautionary tale about professional fragility in the digital age. And we now live in an era where public figures face unprecedented scrutiny, where context collapses, and where outrage can be manufactured and amplified within minutes. And the security we feel in our careers, especially those built on public trust and public perception, may be far more tenuous than we care to admit. So for everyday professionals watching William's story unfold, it raises uncomfortable questions. Could this potentially happen to me? How secure is my own position, really? And what safeguards do I have against a similar fall? And these aren't paranoid thoughts. They are reasonable concerns in a world where professional ruin can arrive with stunning swiftness. And the aftermath was equally brutal, really. Williams didn't just lose a job. That would have been one thing. He lost access to an entire industry. His former colleagues became suddenly all unavailable. His phone calls went unreturned, and the networking relationships he'd cultivated over decades, not only years, all of them seemed to just evaporate overnight. And this professional ostracism is often the unseen damage in these public downfalls, the quiet closing of doors that compounds the public humiliation. People just turn away and say, I'm sorry, I don't want to be part of this. And there is something uniquely American about this kind of public rise and fall, don't you find? Americans celebrate success stories, the climb to prominence, the achievement of status, but they are also equally fascinated by downfalls, perhaps because they confirm their suspicion that success is more fragile than it appears, or perhaps because they reassure themselves that the powerful are vulnerable too. So, for Williams, the professional execution was swift and it was complete. No gradual decline, no gentle exit, no chance to redeem himself within the industry he'd called home and he'd worked for. Just the sudden, jarring transition from insider to suddenly being an outcast and an outsider. From someone whose opinion was sought after to someone whose calls weren't returned and just got stuck in the inbox. From having a voice in national conversations to being completely and totally voiceless. And the irony is that many journalists spend their entire careers reporting on others' downfalls. And they report on politicians caught in scandals, for example, on celebrities making career-ending gaffes, and business leaders toppled by controversy, you name it. And Williams likely never imagined he'd become the subject of such a story himself. That mental distance we maintain, the belief that what happens to others won't happen to us. And it is just another illusion his story basically shatters. And on this note, I really want to also touch on the subject of the financial freefall that Williams experienced. The financial safety net we all think we have, it vanishes faster than morning dew in summer heat when your income just suddenly stops. And this, unfortunately, is the reality to so many people in today's economic crisis. And after Williams lost his prestigious position, he probably thought what many of us would, that his impressive resume and his industry connections would quickly lead to some another opportunity, that he would be able to rebuild that whatever he's lost. And I mean, 30 years of professional achievement should count for something, right? And that's what we normally tell ourselves as well. We tell ourselves these comforting stories like, I've got skills, I've got experience, I've got a network of people who know my worth. But Williams discovered what millions of Americans learn every year the hard way. The job market doesn't care about your past accomplishments when you are suddenly labeled as damaged goods, as an outcast, as an outsider, for whatever reason. If you imagine waking up one day and realizing your professional reputation, like the thing you've spent decades building, has become a liability instead of an asset, and that's exactly what happened to Williams. And the controversy that ended his career didn't just cost him his job, don't get me wrong. It made him radioactive to potential employers. Potential employers would not regard whatever experience he might have had for anything, just because he was poison to them. He didn't exist for them. Those same contacts who once returned his calls promptly now would let them go straight to voicemail. The industry that had been his home for decades, it suddenly had no place for him at all. And this is where the real terror begins, in my opinion. Not in the moment when you actually lose your job, but in that first month after, in the rehab period, when you still believe that all this, whatever it is, whatever happened, whatever mistake you've made, when you still believe it's temporary, when you are still sending out resumes with confidence, when you send out a resume and think to yourself, well, come on, they would know who I am. They would look at this impressive list of employers that I had, and they would see. When you are still networking with optimism, when you come to those networking events, you shake hands, you smile to people, and you're confident that you would be able to beat this. But then weeks stretch into months, and hope starts to crack like parched earth. And Williams experienced this gradual, excruciating realization that there wasn't going to be any quick bounce back, if at all there would be any bounce back at all. So what happens to your finances? Williams likely found himself collapsing into bed each night, muscles throbbing, wondering if tomorrow would be any better. Not because he wanted to, but because his body simply couldn't stay upright any longer. And yet, ironically, physical pain can make restful sleep elusive, creating a vicious cycle where your body needs some recovery time, but it can't fully get it. That picture was of Williams being hired for a retail job to stock shelves, and after he realized that there was no chance he was ever going to make it in his industry again, and he just go out there and pay his bills, and that's it. He was forced to go and be paid $10 an hour stocking shelves in the retail, and he never came back again. He never really returned to the normal life. He never returned to his profession. He's made numerous efforts to come back, but he couldn't, because he wasn't accepted anywhere, even years after. We're not even talking weeks and months after the incident, right? How we all feel normally, we would say, well, media is such a temporary thing. It exists today, it doesn't exist tomorrow, and it's always just a matter of time when people forget. Apparently, even though the consumer would forget, the reader would forget, or possibly not even know who this guy is in the first place, but the employers, they don't forget. They are scared to take on these risks because they know that should they hire someone like Williams at some point, they could potentially be sued by any organization or any person who was aware of this incident for whatever reason. They might say that whatever he writes next contains bias in one way or another. And to finish off today's episode, all I really wanted to say, and I don't want to go into far more detail with what happens to Williams, it's just not a good end of the story at all. But anyway, to finish off today's episode, all I wanted to say is that the world is such an insecure place. We are not guaranteed anything at all. Literally, we go to work every day, we educate ourselves, we go to universities, we take classes, we build relationships, but unfortunately life is such a thing that it can crumble any minute. And I think that one of the biggest purposes that we as human beings have in this world and on this planet is to make meaningful connections with other people who would always be there to support you, who would always stand by your side, even if something like this happens. Because what I want to bring your attention to really in this story is that I've made a huge research on Joseph Williams' story, and I found tons and tons and tons of data on what he's done, what kind of comment he's made, on what kind of reaction there was from this media or that media or anything else. I found information in all details, about pretty much everything, where he lived, where he stayed, what he did, what kind of job applications he made at some point, everything. But I couldn't find any information on his family. I couldn't find any information on who was backing him up during those toughest days of his life. I couldn't see any picture of Joseph Williams with any partner, any loved one who would confront the media and just say, look, leave him alone, and just, come up to him and say, look, I'm backing you up. We are moving upstate and we're doing it together. We'll sort something out. We'll just sit down and think about it. We'll try some online options that could be anonymous even. We live in the 21st century, and even though back in the 2012 it wasn't as eloquent and as technical as today, but still it is 21st century. It's the modern world. There are so many things that you can do, and so many professions where you can succeed and become successful, especially if you are a journalist of such high league and such high power as Joseph Williams was. You could write books. I don't know, Agatha Christie is not the real name of a woman, and Elton John is not actually Elton. It doesn't stop anyone from listening to Elton John and reading Agatha Christie. Now, what I'm saying is that all these things, they are possible when you have support. Whatever situation, whatever circumstance you find yourself in, you would benefit from having a trusted partner, a trusted person, someone who would back you up in any situation. And if you are lucky enough to find this person, then it changes everything. Literally, it changes everything. Because what's wild is how people who actually have support, like internal support within their internal systems, how they can use this support to put themselves up again, to bring themselves back to life, to rising like a phoenix. And this is something that we're going to talk about in the next episode. I understand why it's so hard, because building a trusted and long-lasting relationship and long-lasting connection with someone is not only huge work, but it's also a lot of your personal vulnerability that you have to put into these relationships. You have to actually open yourself, split yourself open in front of the other person. And this kind of vulnerability, it is not accessible to everyone. So in the next episode, we would be talking about the issues of trust that we carry from our past experiences, that we rely on from our past experiences. And I will be talking if I personally think it's a good thing or if it is something that you might want to avoid. In any case, on this note, I want to leave you with all these thoughts. Please kindly drop me comments down below about what you thought about this video, what you think about Joseph Williams, if you were aware of this story at all, and what is your take and perspective on it. Also, as always, please kindly like, share and subscribe this particular episode and subscribe to my channel. That would give me a sign that you are out there, you are listening, and this is actually something that is needed and required. And it gives me a boost to keep going and creating this content for you. And thank you very much for that, by the way, in advance. And anyways, I will see you next time on the next episode of the Unshakeable People podcast. And until then, I wish you to stay safe, loved, and unshakable. I will see you later, guys. Bye-bye.